Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The day we moved in was supposed to mark our new beginning, quiet, freedom, peace. But before the boxes were unpacked, a fake cop squad rolled up, led by a woman with a folder full of lies and a plan to steal everything. They chose the wrong ex-cop to mess with. The morning we arrived at the house, I felt like I'd finally come up for air after holding my breath for months. My wife, Sarah, was already directing the movers like a general with a clipboard, while my two kids, Noah and Ellie, chased each other across the gravel driveway, kicking up dust and laughing like the place had always been home. The house stood quiet and proud at the edge of the tree line, a modest but solid two-story with weathered shutters and a wide porch that begged for coffee at sunrise. This wasn't just a house. This was escape, freedom, mine. I bought the place at probate auction, a clean transfer from the estate of a man who'd passed without heirs. The paperwork was flawless, verified by the court, sealed by the clerk, recorded in the county register. No HOA, no oversight, no damn committees telling me what color I can paint my mailbox. Just birdsong, pine trees, and my name on the deed. And after 20 years wearing a badge and carrying a gun, the idea of silence and sovereignty was damn near holy. I had just started unpacking the last few boxes from the U-Haul when I heard it, gravel crunching under tires. I turned. A black and white SUV pulled up to the edge of the driveway. No markings. Government plates, maybe, maybe not. The vehicle door opened, and two men stepped out, both in police uniforms. Not a badge in sight. No name tags, no unit numbers, just crisp navy fabric and mirrored sunglasses. A third person climbed out from the passenger side. Blonde bob haircut, pencil skirt, tailored blazer. She carried a manila folder like it was a warrant and wore an expression like she'd tasted sour milk and blamed me for it. She walked right up to me like she owned the place and cleared her throat. "Mr. Marlowe?" she asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded slowly, narrowing my eyes. "Can I help you?" "I'm Karen Wells, president of the Lakewood Pines Homeowners Association. I'm here to inform you that this property has been misappropriated and must be vacated immediately." I let out a short laugh, thinking this was some kind of mistaken address. "Misappropriated?" "Yes," she said, flipping open the folder. "This parcel was acquired by Lakewood Pines HOA last month through proper channels. It has already been reassigned to a new family. Your presence here constitutes unlawful occupation of private community property." I stared at her for a beat, processing. Then I laughed again, louder this time. "This property isn't part of your HOA. I checked 6 ways to Sunday before I bought it. You people have no jurisdiction here." One of the uniformed guys stepped forward. "Sir, we're going to need you to gather your things and leave the premises." I glanced down at his belt, plastic zip cuffs, no gun. The other guy had a radio, but it wasn't standard issue, looked like a prop. My instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. These guys weren't cops. "You got a badge?" I asked him calmly. "We don't need badges for a civil enforcement action," he replied. That was all the confirmation I needed. I stepped back, feigning compliance, then moved fast. Years of training take over when the adrenaline hits. I grabbed the zip cuff guy's wrist, twisted, disarmed him in seconds. He went down hard with a grunt. The other one tried to reach for something. I took him down with a knee to the chest and ripped the radio from his vest. It wasn't even tuned to a local police band. Sarah screamed. The kids froze. Karen took a step back, eyes wide, clutching her folder like it could protect her. I spoke into the radio calmly. "This is Ethan Marlowe at 774 Cedar Trail Road. I have 2 individuals impersonating police officers on my property, requesting immediate law enforcement response." Karen started backing away, visibly shaking. "This is a misunderstanding," she yelled. "We thought someone else would be here. We were misinformed. Please, we don't want trouble." I turned my chest slightly so the blinking light on my body comm would be visible. I'd turned it on the second I saw the fake SUV. "Smile for the camera," I said. "You're going viral." The real deputies arrived in less than 10 minutes. I knew a couple of them. Sheriff's Department was still friendly, even if I'd hung up my badge. After a quick assessment, they had the 2 fakes cuffed and stuffed into the back of a real cruiser. Karen was flailing, her carefully curated poise crumbling by the second. "I didn't know they weren't real officers," she cried. "I was just trying to protect the community. I didn't mean to." "That'll go great in court," I said, arms crossed. Deputy Rhodes turned to me. "You got any idea what the hell this was all about?" Not yet, I said, watching Karen being placed into another vehicle, but I'm guessing it's more than just a mix-up. Rhodes nodded, grim. We'll process them. Get statements. You sure you're okay? I looked around. My wife was holding the kids, both of them still pale. The driveway was littered with dropped folders, scuffed gravel, and a broken radio. But the house stood untouched. Mine. I gave a slow nod. I'm good, but I want everything they touched dusted, and I want a report by morning. This wasn't just trespassing. This was an attempt to steal my damn house. If I hadn't been a cop for over 2 decades, maybe I'd have chalked the whole thing up to mental instability. A desperate HOA president with too much power and too little to do. But this wasn't some hysterical HOA overreach. This was organized, prepped, premeditated, and I knew it the moment I stepped into the station and saw the stack of paperwork Karen had handed over like it was gospel. She was sitting across from the detective's desk, flanked by her attorney, a slick, over-tanned guy in a navy suit who looked like he belonged on a billboard for car crash settlements. Karen was still riding the edge of a panic spiral, but you could see the twitch of strategy starting to surface in her eyes again, like she was recalibrating in real time. Detective Carlisle, who'd taken point on the case, motioned me in and handed me a copy of the documents. I sat down, opened the folder, and felt my jaw tighten as I read the first page. A grant deed. Supposedly signed by the previous owner, dated exactly 28 days ago. The grantee, Lakewood Pines Homeowners Association. According to this paper, I was squatting on HOA property. I kept reading. There was a letter of intent from the former owner, stating his desire to donate the property to the HOA for preservation and community beautification. There was even a signature from the local probate judge authorizing the transfer. It would have been almost impressive if it wasn't such amateur hour. I looked up. This is fake. Karen flinched like I'd slapped her. Her lawyer opened his mouth to object, but I kept going. The previous owner died 7 months ago. This document is dated 4, and I have the certified probate ruling from the county court showing the estate passed to auction. My purchase was legally recorded 2 months ago. I've got the original court-stamped deed. Hell, it's hanging on my damn fridge. Carlisle nodded. We already ran the court record database. Your deed is valid, and it matches the transaction history. The transfer to the HOA doesn't exist in the official system, but we wanted your eyes on this, especially this. He flipped the last page around. A judge's signature. Looked clean, looked real, but only if you didn't know what to look for. I squinted. That's not Judge Harlan's signature. Karen sat up straighter. It is. That's the original scanned approval. Lady, I said flatly, I've had Judge Harlan's signature on arrest warrants, subpoenas, restraining orders, and even one dismissal I didn't deserve. That signature looks close, but it ain't his. And the seal's off-center. Karen's lawyer interjected. My client was acting in good faith, based on legal guidance she received from counsel. Then your counsel is either imaginary or about to be disbarred, I shot back. This is a criminal forgery. Karen's hands were visibly shaking now. I didn't forge anything. I just trusted what Gerald gave me. Gerald who? She hesitated. Gerald. Sean. He handled the property filings for the HOA. He said it was standard. He told me it was all approved by the county. Carlisle and I exchanged a look. There was no Gerald Sean in the county land office database, no licensed attorney in state under that name, but there was a Gerald D. Sean, who'd been flagged 3 years ago for impersonating a notary in a property scam in South Carolina. No charges filed, just vanished after a hearing was delayed. Well, he was back. And apparently working pro bono for power-tripping HOA presidents with delusions of conquest. Karen's lawyer started to sweat now. Again, my client had no knowledge of this man's criminal past. She's a community leader, not a forensics expert. Carlisle leaned back in his chair. Your community leader trespassed on private land with 2 men impersonating officers, attempted an unlawful eviction, and now appears to have submitted falsified court documents to justify her claim. That's not a zoning dispute, counselor. That's felony fraud. Karen started crying. Loud, dramatic sobs. She kept shaking her head, saying she didn't know, didn't mean to, just wanted the neighborhood to be safe and cohesive. I wasn't buying it, and I wasn't in the mood for theatrics. You weren't trying to make it cohesive, I said. You were trying to steal it. You knew that house wasn't yours. You just thought you could fake it until the dust settled and nobody looked too close. I turned to Carlisle. I want everything she touched cross-referenced with county records. All HOA acquisitions, all transfers, every signature with a notary seal. If she used this Gerald before, we'll find it." He nodded. "Already in motion. DA's office is on alert. This might be bigger than just your property." Bigger, huh? I didn't know how deep the rot went, but I knew one thing. Karen Wells picked the wrong damn ex-cop to scam. It was 3 a.m. when I woke up in a sweat with a thought I couldn't shake. Something didn't sit right with those 2 fake cops. The way they moved, the way they carried themselves, it had gnawed at me since the arrest. They weren't hardened, weren't confident, didn't have that edge you pick up from working real streets. They didn't carry themselves like enforcers. They were performers. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah, and pulled up the camera footage from the day before the incident. I'd installed a few motion-activated cams already, cheap ones from Home Depot that I used more for wildlife than humans, but they'd caught something. There it was. A black SUV. Same one. Arrived mid-afternoon, day before the visit. The driver's side opened and outstepped Karen Wells, crisp and poised in her HOA power suit. She was talking to someone off camera. Then 2 men stepped into view. One was holding a clipboard. The other had what looked like a prop badge. They laughed, not smiled. Laughed. One of them mimed slapping handcuffs on Karen herself, and they all doubled over like this was the most hilarious damn thing in the world. I stared at the monitor. This wasn't just fraud. This was theater. That morning, I paid a visit to my nearest neighbor down the road, Old Harold, retired electrician with a love for CB radios and tinfoil conspiracies. The man had more cameras on his property than most 7-Elevens. I'd never been so grateful for paranoia. Over a cup of lukewarm coffee and a rambling story about raccoons stealing tomatoes, I managed to get him to hand over his driveway camera footage from the previous week. And, sure enough, there it was, clear as day. The same black SUV, parked in front of my property, Karen standing beside it with the 2 officers, giving them what looked like a pep talk. One of the men took a pair of plastic zip cuffs out of a duffel bag and practiced tightening them on his own wrists. Harold leaned over my shoulder. "Those boys ain't real cops," he grunted. "That one on the left? That's Drew Maynard. He was in that community play last fall. What was it? 12 Angry Men. Played the loud one." I turned slowly. "You're telling me Karen hired local theater actors to impersonate police?" Harold scratched his neck. "Wouldn't be surprised. Town's full of bored drama folks looking for side cash. Karen's got a reputation for creative solutions." By noon, I was back at the sheriff's office with a flash drive full of footage, names, and a theory that was starting to sound like satire. Carlisle was halfway through a burrito when I dropped the USB on his desk. "You're going to want to see this." He whistled low after 5 minutes of playback. "Jesus Christ, this woman staged her own SWAT team." "Actors," I said. "One's local, the other might have skipped town. We ran names through the DMV, social media, local theater rosters. The first guy, Drew, was easy. He was tagged in at least 6 Facebook posts from the Community Center Drama Club, including a painfully overacted performance as a sheriff in a Halloween play. He was arrested quietly that same evening at a poetry open mic mid-haiku. He broke fast, told the whole story, said Karen hired them under the pretense of shooting an HOA training video about handling hostile trespassers, paid them $2,000 cash each, told them the homeowner was dangerous but nonviolent, and that they were to play their roles until real police arrived, at which point they were to retreat and claim confusion. "She gave us lines, man," Drew said during his confession. "Like a script, said if we did it right, the board would use the footage in their security seminar. I thought it was weird, but she paid up front and swore it was legal." The other guy, Mark Withers, was a bit more elusive. No social media, no known address, but he'd been seen boarding a bus to Jacksonville 2 nights earlier. Carlisle issued a bolo and forwarded his info to law enforcement in Florida. Now we had impersonation, conspiracy, and documented premeditation. The DA's office bumped the case to a higher level, adding a charge of attempted unlawful detainment using falsified authority. A mouthful, sure, but it meant the charges just jumped from embarrassing to career-ending. Karen was brought back in for questioning. She denied everything. They were supposed to be filming an HOA educational piece. She insisted. "I had no idea they would actually try to detain anyone." Carlisle hit play on the video. There she was in full color, telling the men to make it look real and that he's ex-law enforcement, but he won't resist if you look official enough. Karen turned white. Her attorney asked for a recess. I stood by the hallway window, arms crossed, watching the sun dip behind the trees. There was a heavy feeling in my chest. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Something worse. This wasn't over, not even close. This wasn't just one bad HOA president with delusions of grandeur. This was a performance, a con, and it had a full cast. The next bomb dropped just 48 hours later, and it didn't come from the courthouse or Karen's smug little legal circus. It came from the kind of couple you'd expect to be baking pies or knitting sweaters, not filing criminal complaints. George and Lillian Carruthers, mid-70s. She wore her hair in a white bun so tight it could hold a coffee mug, and he walked like both knees had been replaced by plywood. They showed up unannounced on my porch just after noon, holding a folder stuffed with documents and a righteous fury I hadn't seen since my sheriff's days. "You're the man who tangled with Karen Wells, right?" George asked, not waiting for me to confirm. "We need to talk." I poured coffee for all of us and listened as they laid it out. They'd tried to buy a house just down the road, a small one-story cottage surrounded by trees, perfect for their retirement. Made an offer, signed a contract through a realtor who claimed to work exclusively with the HOA, paid a $60,000 deposit via cashier's check. A week later, they were told there had been a clerical error in the title and the property was no longer available. When they asked for a refund, the agent ghosted them. HOA denied any involvement. Karen, of course, never returned a single call. That's when they started digging. The agent wasn't licensed, the contract not on file anywhere, and the notary stamp on the deal, suspiciously similar to the one on the fake deed Karen tried to use on me. I looked through their folder. It was a mess. Misaligned fonts, incorrect parcel numbers, and even a signature from a Gerald Shawn-esque. I nearly spit out my coffee. "You've been scammed," I said, "by the same ghost lawyer who tried to steal my house." George's jaw clenched. Lillian looked like she was about to cry. "You think we'll ever see that money again?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't lie either. That night, I took their paperwork straight to Detective Carlisle and the DA's office. The more we compared notes, the more rot we found. Turns out the Carruthers weren't the only ones. Within 72 hours, we uncovered 7 more disputed properties within Lakewood Pines border. All of them shared common traits: elderly or out-of-state previous owners, seemingly abandoned properties, and suddenly voided contracts after large down payments. None of it added up, unless you looked at it like a long con. Karen hadn't just pulled a fast one on me. She was running a full-blown land laundering scheme, backed by forged court documents, fake agents, and manipulated internal HOA records. And she'd been doing it for at least 2 years. The real twist: she wasn't acting alone. A name popped up again and again in internal emails we subpoenaed from the HOA servers. A clerk named Eric Mallard, mid-level drone in the county land registry office. Quiet, clean record, nothing flashy. But the digital fingerprint trail was undeniable. Every fraudulent deed had passed through his login at some point, always late at night, outside of business hours. Mallard had the keys to the kingdom, and Karen had clearly found a way to use them. We pulled phone records, dozens of calls between Karen and Mallard, burner numbers, payments traced to a shell LLC registered in Nevada under the name LKP Community Development. All of it stunk. DA Sykes called a press conference the next morning. I stood off to the side while he stepped up to the podium, flanked by county investigators and Carlisle. "We are opening a formal criminal investigation into the activities of the Lakewood Pines Homeowners Association," he announced. "Preliminary findings suggest a coordinated effort to fraudulently acquire and redistribute property through forged legal instruments and fictitious legal counsel. We are urging any and all residents who believe they may be affected to come forward." They handed out flyers, posted hotlines. By the end of the day, 3 more victims had stepped out of the shadows. Back at the station, we started going through HOA board meeting minutes, half of which weren't even recorded properly, the rest written with just enough plausible deniability to give a snake a legal out. But one thing stood out. Karen had repeatedly lobbied for community expansion measures and strategic acquisition rights. Every vote passed by slim margins. Most board members either abstained or claimed ignorance. And then we found the mother lode, a hidden folder in her HOA email, marked Compliance Private. Inside were scanned copies of over a dozen forged documents, each attached to detailed instructions for rapid transfer protocol, and a bizarre spreadsheet titled Resale Targets, High ROI. That was when it became clear. She wasn't just trying to beautify the neighborhood. She was flipping stolen houses for profit, using dead people's names and a counterfeit legal infrastructure to do it. And she'd nearly gotten away with it. If she hadn't sent 2 idiot actors in cop costumes to my front door, she probably would have run this racket for years. Karen was arrested again 2 days later, this time without the theatrics. No SUV, no folder, no fake cops. Just 2 detectives and a pair of cold steel cuffs. She didn't cry this time. She didn't say a word, but I could see it in her eyes. She still thought she was going to win. I expected Karen to panic, scream, deny. Maybe even try to play the victim card again. She was good at that. But after the second arrest, she went quiet. Not calm, not defeated, just calculating. Like a chess player staring at a half-burned board trying to figure out how to castle out of hell. That silence didn't last long. It was 3 days later when word came down that she'd made bail. Again. This time courtesy of a well-known local bail bondsman with deep ties to the real estate scene. Not a coincidence. I knew a power move when I saw one. She was digging in. Then, like a roach when the lights come on, her influence started scuttling out from the walls. Members of the HOA board, those who hadn't vanished or lawyered up, suddenly refused to cooperate with the investigation. They claimed no knowledge of wrongdoing, insisted they never saw the real documents, and started invoking procedural nonsense to dodge subpoenas. It was like they were reading from a script. That's when Carlisle showed me the photos. Dozens of them. Screenshots from Karen's private email archive. We'd gotten a warrant for the HOA's email servers and recovered a hidden stash, encrypted but not well enough. Inside were files labeled with board member names, each attached to something ugly. One showed a bank transfer, $10,000, to a board member's private LLC, dated suspiciously close to the approval of a community development zoning change. Another was a photo of someone's car parked outside a motel. Someone who'd told his wife he was out of town for work. Another, this one burned into my memory, was a screenshot of a board member's browser history. It was the kind of stuff you don't just find. You harvest it, deliberately. Karen didn't just run the HOA. She ran it like a cartel, with blackmail, leverage, and digital chains. You're telling me she had dirt on all of them? I asked Carlisle. He nodded. Looks that way. Enough to keep their mouths shut, maybe even enough to get them to push things through. She had them cornered. It made sense. No wonder no one had spoken up. No one tried to stop the shady property transfers. No one questioned the new buyer incentives or the quiet renovations on abandoned homes. Karen didn't need their approval. She owned their shame. It was a full-blown racket, and the HOA was her front. And then it got worse. I got a call from one of the junior board members. A kid named Damian Ortiz, mid-20s, idealistic, probably joined the HOA to pad his resume. He sounded terrified. She sent me a message, he whispered. Told me not to talk. Said if I did, something might accidentally happen to my student loan status. I asked if he had proof. He forwarded the message. It was phrased so carefully it could have been a Hallmark card, but between the lines, it was pure threat. She said, "You've been such a promising young man. I'd hate for bureaucratic delays to stall your future." I told him to meet me in person. He was shaking when he showed up at my porch that night, looking over his shoulder every 3 seconds like she might jump out of the bushes. "I didn't know Ethan," he said. "She kept us in the dark, only gave us sanitized updates. Said she was handling legal transfers on behalf of the HOA and that everything was pre-approved by the county. She had spreadsheets, stamps, even quotes from state statutes. I just thought, I don't know. I thought she was intense, not criminal." He handed me a flash drive. "She used this laptop during meetings," he said. "Sometimes forgot to lock it when she went to the bathroom. I made copies of some files. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I saved them." What was on that drive made my blood run cold. There were internal memos between Karen and Gerald Shawn going back over a year. Drafted contracts with placeholders for fake signatures. Purchase orders for properties still legally owned by deceased individuals. And, most damning, a PowerPoint presentation titled Streamlined Acquisition Tactics, where she literally outlined the scam in bullet points like a corporate growth strategy. One slide even had the phrase, "If contested, delay. If threatened, discredit. If exposed, collapse into victim mode." It was a playbook. And it worked, until now. The DA's office moved fast. With the new files from Damien, they issued additional charges: criminal conspiracy, coercion, wire fraud, obstruction of justice. A federal prosecutor was looped in. Apparently, using electronic communications and bank wires for real estate scams pushes the whole operation into federal territory, which meant one thing: Karen was now staring down federal prison time. That night, I sat on my porch watching the wind dance through the trees, trying to make sense of just how far someone would go for power in a community of vinyl fences and identical mailboxes. Karen wasn't just ruthless, she was strategic, paranoid, prepared. But even queens burn when the board flips, and I was done playing defense. If there's one thing the badge taught me, it's this: crooks panic when they feel the walls closing in. The smart ones go quiet, start planning their escape. The arrogant ones double down. Karen, of course, chose door number 2. Even after new charges stacked up like junk mail on a condemned porch, she kept strutting into court like she still ran the damn county. Her lawyer kept filing delays and motions to dismiss, citing harassment, misunderstood procedures, and my personal favorite, overreach by law enforcement fueled by community gossip. But I'd seen that look in her eyes before. I saw it when I was a deputy walking into interrogation rooms where liars thought their stories were airtight. It's a look that says, I'm not caught, not really, not yet. I knew we needed more, not just paper trails and scared HOA lackeys. We needed her caught in the act, undeniable, irrefutable, camera ready, so I set the trap. It started with a fake listing to be exact. I created an online post on a quiet forum used by private real estate investors using a dummy profile and an alias I hadn't used since my undercover days. The property listed: a small vacant lot just 1 block from my place. A real parcel, but one that hadn't changed hands in years. According to public record, it still belonged to a man who'd moved out of state 6 years ago. I made it look like the perfect target: absentee owner, undeveloped land, unmonitored. I even threw in some code violations to make it look like the kind of property Karen would swoop in to rescue for the good of the community. Then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, a realtor, one of the same ones who'd been involved in the Carruthers deal, contacted the alias I'd created. Said he had a client interested in expediting a purchase using a community development provision. Code words. The same script all over again. We tracked him. He met with Karen that evening at the HOA clubhouse. Security footage, legally obtained thanks to a court order, showed her handing over an envelope and pointing to a map on the wall. Next day, an application appeared at the county office. Transfer of ownership for the very lot I'd listed, signed by the out-of-state owner. Only that owner had died in 2019. Nailed. Carlisle and I coordinated with the DA and the feds. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted the kill shot. I wanted her own words on tape, so I took it up a notch. I faked a move. We packed up just enough of the house to make it look like we were leaving town. U-Haul in the driveway, covered furniture on the porch, even an Instagram post from Sarah about starting a new chapter. In reality, I moved my family into a rental 2 doors down and wired the house with more surveillance than Fort Knox. And then we waited. Karen showed up 2 nights later. Same SUV, same blazer, same smug posture. Only this time she brought 2 buyers with her. Young couple, first-time homeowners, glowing with false hope. She opened the gate with a key I didn't even know she had. God knows where she got that from. And gave them a private tour of my home. The cameras caught every word. Technically, the previous owner vacated under disputed terms, but we're handling the final paperwork through HOA arbitration. The deed will be clean. Just trust me. One of the buyers asked, "Are you sure he's not coming back?" Karen laughed. He already left. People like that never stay. They want land, not neighbors. Once the ink dries, it's yours. I stepped into the hallway before she could open the door to my study. "Funny," I said. "I must have missed that memo." Karen froze. One of the buyers screamed. The guy looked like he was about to throw up. Karen tried to smile, but her face cracked like cheap porcelain. I thought this property was... I was just showing them the potential... Save it. I stepped aside, revealing the small, blinking camera on the hallway wall. You've just added unlawful entry and attempted fraudulent conveyance to your rap sheet. And this time, the feds are already watching. That was no bluff. The audio and video were being live streamed to a task force office set up just the day before. They watched everything. 10 minutes later, a pair of unmarked cars pulled up to the curb. 2 federal agents and 1 U.S. Marshal stepped out. Karen didn't move. "Ms. Wells," one said calmly, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and criminal impersonation of legal authority. You have the right to remain silent." I didn't hear the rest. I was too busy watching her face. The buyers were escorted out, visibly shaken. Karen, still silent, was cuffed and placed in the back seat. For the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even plead. She just stared at me through the window as they pulled away, lips pressed in a thin line, eyes cold with something far worse than anger, conviction. She still thought she'd win. I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and sat in my chair for a long while. Not in relief. No, not yet. Because Karen might have finally crossed the line into federal hands. But you don't corner someone like her without expecting a last twist. And I wasn't about to blink first. The courtroom was colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me. Federal cases had a way of draining the soul out of a room, even before the gavel came down. The wood felt darker, the lighting more clinical. No gallery chatter, no buzzing cell phones. Just hard benches, cold coffee, and the quiet hum of inevitability. Karen Wells sat at the defendant's table dressed like a woman going to a charity gala, not a fraud trial. Hair perfectly set, soft beige suit. Makeup so thick you'd need a chisel to crack it. Her eyes, though, those were real, alert, sharp. She scanned the room like she was still in charge of it. Like this was some HOA meeting that had just gotten out of hand. Her new defense team was flashier than the last. Big city types, one with a bow tie and a $1,000 watch, the other wearing an expression like he wanted to be anywhere else. Their whole strategy, it turned out, boiled down to one word: confusion. Make the paperwork look complicated, make the witnesses look uncertain, make the jurors doubt just enough. But it wasn't going to work, because we had everything. The footage of her touring my home with unsuspecting buyers, the emails, the forged deeds, the bank transfers, the actor confessions. The presentation slide where she literally outlined the steps of her con in bullet points like it was a TED Talk for sociopaths. Still, Karen made a show of playing the wronged woman. When she took the stand, God help me, they let her take the stand. She looked straight at the jury and unleashed the full force of her crocodile charm. "I was misled by a man I trusted," she said, dabbing her eyes. "I only wanted what was best for the community. Gerald told me everything was legal. I believed him. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." She even had the gall to say, "I thought Mr. Marlowe had abandoned the house. I simply wanted to prevent squatters." Squatters. I nearly stood up right there, but my lawyer placed a firm hand on my knee. So I sat, silent, watching. Then it was the prosecution's turn. They were calm. Precise. They didn't yell, didn't grandstand, they just played the tape. Karen's voice clear as day. "He's ex-law enforcement. He won't resist if you look official enough." Then, once he's gone, the HOA can process the reassignment quietly. Then, if anyone asks, we say it was a misunderstanding. Play dumb. Delay. The jury sat frozen. Even Karen flinched. But the real kill shot came from the final witness. A federal agent took the stand and detailed how Karen had used encrypted messaging apps to communicate with her fake lawyer, how she had set up multiple shell companies to funnel resale profits, how she had paid off HOA board members, and worse, how she had attempted to access county servers using an insider login, attempting to plant predated deeds that would verify ownership if the fraud was ever challenged. "And how did you obtain this information?" her attorney asked. "Court-approved digital surveillance, authorized after the defendant's second arrest," the agent replied. "And the authenticity of this data? Verified by 3 independent forensic analysts." Checkmate. Karen didn't look at the jury anymore after that. She just stared at the floor. The closing arguments were quick. The prosecution walked them through the fraud, the impersonation, the conspiracy. They didn't embellish. They didn't need to. The evidence was ironclad. Karen's lawyer tried one last Hail Mary. She was ambitious, naive maybe, but not malicious. The jury didn't buy it. It took them 4 hours, guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, impersonation of law enforcement, wire fraud, mail fraud, attempted unlawful detainment, abuse of public office. Judge Walters didn't waste time with the sentencing. She read each charge like she was carving stone, then handed down 15 years without parole. State prison first, federal charges after. Karen blinked slowly, like she hadn't processed the words. Then she turned toward me as they cuffed her. Just for a second. No words, no tears, just a look. Not of regret, of resentment. She still thought I'd ruined her life, as if she hadn't done it all herself. Behind her, 2 bailiffs led out the former lawyer Gerald, real name Grant Sherman, after he pled out and testified. He got 9 years. Mallard, the county insider, took 7. One HOA board member had already fled the state. U.S. Marshals were looking. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Cameras, reporters, angry residents. My face was on local news for a week. Former sheriff stops HOA scam, they said. Karen Wells convicted in property fraud ring. But none of that mattered to me, because justice didn't look like a headline. It looked like her being taken away in handcuffs, while the house she tried to steal sat exactly where it belonged. Under my name. The morning after the sentencing, I sat on my porch with a mug of black coffee and a blank stare. For the first time in weeks, there were no police cruisers at the curb, no reporters with microphones, no HOA drones buzzing around with clipboards and fake smiles. The house was quiet. Mine again. Fully. Finally. Permanently. Across the gravel driveway, a new sign stood on a clean metal post, freshly drilled into the ground. Private property not part of any HOA fake cops will be arrested. It wasn't subtle, but neither was I. Not anymore. Sarah stepped out, hair still a mess, robe wrapped tight. She looked at the sign and smirked. Little much. Not for this zip code, I said, taking another sip. The kids were already in the backyard, running around like none of it had ever happened. That's how it should be. Kids shouldn't have to grow up watching their father nearly get arrested by costumed clowns backed by real corruption. Later that day, I got a letter. Not from the county. Not from the DA. From a woman named Teresa Beckett, the widow of the man who owned this house before me. She wrote in elegant, handwritten cursive, the kind no one uses anymore. Dear Mr. Marlowe, I followed the case. I saw the news. I want to thank you for protecting what was once my husband's land. That house meant something to him. It means something to me that you fought for it. If not for you, they would have kept stealing from people like him. People like me. With gratitude, Teresa Beckett, I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the drawer next to my deed. Later that week, I got a call from Damian Ortiz, the young HOA board member who'd helped crack the case. He'd been asked to testify in several pending civil suits against Lakewood Pines. Dozens of residents were lawyering up, furious that their fees had funded a criminal enterprise. Damian said the entire HOA might dissolve by year's end. I don't know what'll replace it, he said, but I'm hoping it's honest. Honest would be a start, I told him. We hung up and I sat back, letting the silence fill the house. The kind of silence you only appreciate after surviving the noise. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like reclamation. Weeks passed. Fall started to roll in, and the trees went golden at the edges. One Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I raised a small American flag on the front porch, right next to another flag I had custom printed. It said, "Fraud-proof, owned by law, protected by me." Every Saturday after that, I sat under that flag with my coffee and a good book. Sometimes neighbors waved. Sometimes they stopped to talk about fences, family, freedom, never about HOAs. The world moved on. Karen Wells started her 15-year sentence at a medium-security federal facility upstate. Rumor had it she was already trying to get a position on the inmate council. Grant Sherman, the fake lawyer, got 9 years. Tried to teach legal writing classes in prison. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Eric Mallard's plea deal forced him to testify against half the corrupt structure he helped maintain. He lost everything: career, pension, anonymity. But me, I got my house. And something more. Every time I walk those pine-covered acres, I remember that this isn't just land. It's the line I drew in the dirt. It's the stand I took. It's proof that power, real power, doesn't come from a badge, or a gavel, or a neighborhood council with delusions of empire. It comes from knowing where your boundary is, and never letting anyone cross it.